Howdy once again, it's tubalcain, and this morning I'm going to do a little repair job, or I hope I'll do a repair job here on this Brown & Sharpe caliper. Now I just picked this up at an auction along with a couple others which I think I show in another video. So it's in the original box, although this says it's the case, so maybe the case was sold separate and the calipers was not in it, but I do like the Brown & Sharpe boxes, especially when they're held upright. So anyway, here is the caliper, and it looks to be in good used condition, although it's old enough to where you can see the wear on the case and the deterioration of the foam. And this is an older model. This is probably 40 years old or so, and it is a Brown & Sharpe. But notice that it's made in Germany, and I have a sneaking suspicion this is a Helios. It looks an awful lot like a Helios rebranded. Maybe somebody can tell me whether I'm right or wrong. And there are several names stamped on here. Here's an Ellerbrock. Now I knew an Ellerbrock. I know what town this came from, here in the Illinois Valley. I knew a Joe Ellerbrock. But look, his name is scratched off like he never existed. And then another man must have come across it or bought it or whatever. And I guess his name could be scratched off because he's dead. Well, no need of me putting my name on here because I'm a one-man shop, but if you're in a bigger shop, you got to have your name on it. It's just a shame that they weren't put on a little bit neater than that. Anyway, when I saw this at the auction, I could see that it zeroes out, but I like it when it zeroes out at the 12 o'clock position. So what has happened here, and I've had this problem with other calipers, and I repaired my Enco many years ago so that, I'll just wipe them, so that when they close, the hand is in the 12 o'clock position. Or I should say the dial is, or both. Now these operate on the principle of a rack and pinion, so there's a little rack there. Chips get into the mechanism here, and of course there's a pinion on the back of the shaft that holds the needle on, and maybe we can see that when I take the other one apart. So I have to take it apart and re-engage the gear with the rack, I believe. Also, I will clean it thoroughly, and you can see that it's dirty. Also, I have seen them jump a tooth by people moving them real rapidly, which I consider abuse, to just pull it down full speed. Alright, enough on the intro. Flash, flash. I interrupt this video for a special news bulletin. I just braved the cold and went out to the Kennedy box in my garage and dug out this caliper, which I've had for a number of years, and I paid no attention to it because it's in with my mechanics tools, because I think I paid $5 for it and I use it for rough work out in the garage. But a few moments ago I said that this sure did look like a Helios, and I just had to satisfy my own curiosity, and sure enough, this is a rebranded Helios, which is not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. Hardened throughout Germany. Hardened throughout Germany. Yes, these are the same, and of course, watch this. Does not zero out. They never do, and no one ever takes the time and effort to do what I'm about to show you that I'm going to do. And really, I need to do this one too, but I'm sure by the time this video is over, I will not be in the mood. But there's another Helios, and this one led a rough life, so rough that no one even cared to put their name on it. And now I return to the regular video. Perhaps you can see how dirty this is, so I will clean that up while I have it apart. And if I remember correctly, to get it apart I need to remove these two little screws, not the other ones. The other ones appear to hold the rack on. Yes, they do. You can see the other side of the screws. So I will try to get these loose and then pull this all the way off. And as I remember, it's kind of a baguette and bagosh to get it back on. Now I got to be careful not to lose those screws. That's why I got a cloth laid down. If I lose the screws, I have to throw the caliper away. I know it seems foolish, but in the comments, put down which you like best, the Brown and Sharpe boxes or the Starrett boxes. Silly, I know. All right. I thought that I had quality jeweler screwdrivers, but I'm forced to use these cheap little things. I had several sets of those. I thought I had more quality Jensen ones or other branded ones such as this in the small size. Be most appropriate to use this German one, but that's a Phillips. Also I have a few Craftsman that appear to be well made, but also not in the smaller size. They were just oddballs, but I'm going to remove these two screws. I sure do get sidetracked, don't I? As you can imagine, I am wearing my optivisor. So there's the little keeper. And the two screws that I must not lose. And you can see that it's dirty, but why wouldn't it be if it had been in a shop? And I'll get that all off. And off it comes, I hope. Extremely dirty. It is hardened throughout though. And then looking on the back side, yeah, I remember that those come right out. That's not a problem. Looking at the back side, still can't see the little gear. Alright, off camera, I'm going to spend some time cleaning this with the solvent the best that I can, and then ready to come back and see if we can get it reassembled. Well, I failed to notice that the gear teeth do not go all the way to the end of the rack. So I can't just slide the whole thing off, or it probably would bend the pinion. So plan B here, and I've got a little bit ahead of myself without the camera on, was to remove the dial. I want to take the face off here, but in order to get the dial off, there are three tiny little screws which I loosened up, and then it pulled off. Then I got the dial off. I just slid it off to the side along with a spacer. Lay that off to the side, and now attempt to remove these screws, and then I'd like to take the hand off. I don't know if I can get it off without a special puller of some kind. I may have gotten a little bit too deep into this project. You know, I wish I hadn't started this project. They probably had young German women doing this with great eyesight and great dexterity and the right tools. But I did take off these two screws and little tiny washers, and that allows me to take this off, and I'll be able to clean that. And then looking at it from the back side, there's that little pinion I spoke of that jumped the tooth. And it's so tiny, I guess I'm not surprised. So I'm going to go ahead and clean this. I won't take out that final screw there because you can see that holds this. And there's a little corrosion there, even though it says stainless. I could not get that off. Doesn't matter. Alright, so I'll clean this up. And one other thing I didn't show you here, this is the little brass gib that came out and goes up into position there. It fell over there, that's not in the right position. It is held in place so it won't slide out by this tiny little groove slot, and the gib can be tightened with those two tiny screws as it wears. I'm sure someone's going to say I was a sexist talking about those young women and girls in the Helios plant, but I had been in the West Clocks plant many times in Peru, Illinois. That's where I grew up. And there were rows and rows and rows of women, some of them young, some of them not young, doing all of that delicate work. They were also the ones that gave up their lives to paint the dials with luminous paint. If you have studied the story in the book about the luminous dial girls. Anyway, boy, I get sidetracked. I suppose it's blasphemy, and I'm using Starrett oil. I don't even know if they make Brown and Sharp oil, but I hope that the Nazis don't, not safety Nazis, Starrett Nazis don't get after me on that. Okay. Putting her back together with a little of that oil on there, and the gib is in place. See the end of it there. Also, I thought it's neat here that their screws are captive. That is, they're not going to fall out by backing off and be lost in the shop someplace among the chips and swarf. So now I'm going to try to put this back in place with the hand at 12 o'clock. And that'll be a little bit baguesse and bagosh, I'm sure, to say the least, if not less. And I used, of course, as usual, my wife's toothbrush to clean this, and solvent, before I oiled it. And whoops, yes, you noticed, I forgot to put that on. No big deal now, it would be a big deal later on. I have a heck of a time seeing what I'm doing here. You know, it's hard to see through cataracts. But even using all of these things it's useful, but I need three hands. So what I'm doing here, that you can't see, I have a relatively large monitor that I use as I'm taping, and I'm looking at the monitor, and that magnifies this greatly. Who cares? So, with the pinion, which is attached to the needle in the 12 o'clock position, can I get it to mesh? Look at my hands from that brake cleaner. Yeah. Alright, let's see if it goes in. And I've cleaned the jaws and brought them together. That took a little finessing, longer than what your patience would permit as I was taping it, so I cut that part out. Anyway, I got it to engage, but look at the slop in there. Well, that's due to the fact that this dial along with the spacer, or the back of the dial, bezel, whatever it is not in place, you know, to take up this space. But since the jaws are together, I think I have the orientation, so I'm going to go ahead and put these two screws in, and then of course the dial, and I'm going to call that the bezel. I don't know what it really is called. I'm making up some of these names. My mother was German. Her name was Hilgen, maiden name Hilgen, from Cedarburg, Wisconsin, near Milwaukee. She spoke German. I wish I would have learned some of it. My dad spoke Norwegian. I didn't learn any of that. They didn't bother to teach us any of that. All right, what I've done here now with the bezel in place for spacing, I think I've got it to zero out. And this just in place loose yet. Look at how tiny these screws are. I had to use the very smallest screwdriver I had. The Swiss were famous for doing wonderful fine work like that also. All right, now if I can get the spacer on and the dial back, and it's pretty clean. I don't think I'm even going to attempt to clean that. Sometimes they get coolant on these, you know, in the factories or on the shops, but didn't appear to be a problem. Also, I will put this little keeper back on this end, if I haven't lost it. And I haven't. I'm sure all of you clockmakers, watchmakers, jewelers, and men that work on these instruments are cringing as I put the dial back on. I didn't show that to prevent you from cringing, and you would have said, I merely take the hand off. Well, you know, I used to have one of those little pullers for the hand, but I don't anymore. Actually, I donated that stuff to the museum at the West Clocks factory, or where the factory was. Anything that I had that was watch related or clock related, I donated to that museum. Okay. Now I have to get that all lined up and tighten the little bezel screws, and this end is done, I believe. I'm looking at the monitor. And two more. Off camera, as I fumble through this, I smell something. I don't think you can smell it through your computer monitor, but what I'm smelling is the sweet smell of success. This, of course, can be adjusted, but it always bugged the heck out of me when the needles were at an angle, even though it wouldn't hurt the function at all. All right, that little keeper is on. Just a couple more drops of the Starrett oil. And you know, I made fun of these cheap screwdrivers, but they were quite functional, and the tips appeared to be hardened properly. If you like this video, consider giving me a thumbs up, but not one that looks like that. Consider subscribing if you have not already. With this set of gauge blocks, let's take a few readings. 50 thousandths. Ooh, arbitrarily take 70. 700, I mean. 700 when I was thinking. 850. Oh, let's see what else we got here. Let's do a 950. A little bit off there. What's the deal? Let me go back to, oh, here's 1 inch. One inch is right on. Why is that 950 not right on? Alright, that's better. I must have had it cocked just a little bit. Let's do a 2 inch and then let's call this a day. So we have to assume, not assume, we can check it with all of these gauge blocks so that we see that it's accurate within its whole range, not just down in one little section where it gets used the most often. Well, that concludes this video. I made it a little longer than it should be. Hope you enjoyed it. This is tubalcain saying 0 out and see you in my next video.